Hello and welcome back to episode number 2 of Art Gem Interviews with sculptor artist Keith L. Andrews from Guatemala. So, nice to meet you. What's your name and what do you do and where do you live?
Hi, my name is Keith Andrews. I breathe and metabolize and otherwise keep things going. I expect I have about 10 more years left, and my life project is to try and identify and then recognize sculpturally people who otherwise would not have any sort of permanent monument or statue or recognition of their significant contributions to the world. I'd like to fight against the cynicism, the fatalism, and the feelings that humanity is somehow on a downward spiral by highlighting the great things that pretty much ordinary sorts of people or above average people are doing to help us move forward.
And you do that specifically through sculpture, correct?
I do that
in Guatemala.
through sculpture. My home base is in Guatemala.
In your studio?
My pieces are presently in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and the United States.
Beautiful. Do you feel like art has a big effect on your life? And how does it affect your life?
I'm almost 71 years old, and at 21 years old, I turned my back on art.
Really?
I decided I would dedicate my life to applied biological sciences to try and save the world. And I went through graduate school and then headed off to Central America. And I spent an entire life there.
So what brought you back to art?
The opportunity.
After science.
The idea that I had put it off for so long that it was time to go back and take the road not taken at 21 years old and to complete my development as a human being.
Yeah.
To try and work on that other hemisphere. To
and do you feel like
detoxify from the Cartesian rationality and the bureaucratic tendencies that I had developed as I worked in science and administration.
So it was like
complete my development as a human.
And do you feel like that was successful?
It's a process. Life is a process.
Absolutely. But a fun process.
Yeah. You as an artist know that the creative process involves moments of euphoria and real satisfaction. Struggle, frustration, and absolute boredom, where I am adding or modifying a little chunk of clay and then remodifying it, and then at the end of the day saying, it didn't work out, I'll try again tomorrow. I imagine doing murals is not terribly different. You sometimes have to back off and try again. But yes, it's satisfying because it's a learning process. And you finally get to something that almost never lives up to your original expectations, but nonetheless is satisfactory and would not have existed had I not done it. So yeah, it's a way of creating meaning in my life.
Do you feel that your science and your background has inspired you, or how have you been inspired throughout your life to create your sculptures?
We all are the sum of our experiences and decisions that we've made. We're all today what we have become by what we have done.
Yeah.
That's the base that we're operating from.
Right.
So yeah, I can't deny that I am both limited by and given a unique perspective or set of opportunities based on what my experience has been.
Yeah.
I think back to that point when I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened had I gone into art school? I would have had
How would you
to
like
confront all of that 1960s, 1970s art.
Right.
That as I look at it now, it does not resonate with me. I imagine I would have been really frustrated.
Yeah.
And maybe I have been blessed in some way by having postponed my re-entry into a time when the art world is so incredibly diverse, has so many different ways of approaching life. You know, there is no way that I could be comfortable with an awful lot of what I see this week here in Miami Art Week.
Right.
I'm not a partier.
But maybe inspired by it in a way.
No, but then I some of it, yes. And also, I'm better able to define what I'm not, which is a key thing to defining what I am.
To see what other people do to kind of be like, I do want to do that or don't want to do that. I don't want to go in that way.
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing it. It doesn't need to be done. I don't need to do that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, I run into stuff. I'm reminded of people like JR.
Yep.
Or
he's here this
is
week.
he
Yeah,
really?
he is. At 6 p.m. He has an event tonight, actually.
Where?
It's a screening. He's showing his new project called Paper and Glue.
Thank
you. With Pharrell Williams, actually, tonight at 6 p.m. Yeah.
But you know what? See, that kind of person with that kind of a social orientation, being so remarkably successful.
Yeah.
Successful in the sense of impacting positively on humanity.
Lots of different
that
successes.
Is so much more significant
I agree.
Than so much of what I see shown on the walls of most of the galleries that are represented at the different fairs that we've gone to.
Mm-hmm. So, one last question. Could you talk about your process a little bit? Like, what's your process to create one of these sculptures that I see? Like, we'll show one of the pictures on the screen right now of some of your work. But how do you create these? Like, what's your process of going from clay to a ball of clay, or what? It
starts before that, trying to find the right subject.
Okay.
I try and read widely. My wife and I have had the opportunity to travel widely. I've known so many remarkable people in my life that I find a subject that satisfies this criteria of somebody having done something significant.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they are representative. They are a single microcosm of what is something that is replicated hundreds or millions of times. Then I look to imagine what medium would be appropriate and try and find a medium that I'm uncomfortable with, that I've not worked in before.
And what would those mediums be?
Recently, it's been largely fiberglass mixed with soil, like James Croak worked with, or concrete. I recently did, earlier this year, a really interesting over life-size monument in an African American community established right after the Civil War.
Wow.
that honored the matriarchs of this community, which is now largely disbanded, but is nonetheless a part of U.S. and South Carolina and Pumpkin Town, South Carolina history.
So
and I got to work in concrete for the first time.
Wow.
So I always try as much as possible to try something new. I'm now doing an altar to the novelist Kurt Vonnegut, who was influential in my generation. I think should have a continuing legacy, because the kinds of positions that he took, the kinds of things he stood for, the values that he embodied, including the contradictions that he had in his own life and in his writing, seem to me to be terribly relevant right now. So he was a secular humanist, so I am trying to do an altar that looks like a religious altar. Yeah, I'll send you a picture.
Okay, yeah, we'll wrap this up, but So once you find your process, once you find your materials that you're going to use and how you're inspired by it, how do you go about like creating your sculpture? How do you put it together? Or is that a whole...
I think it varies. Inevitably, I will always have an original concept. I make some sort of a preliminary maquette, but without exception, with one exception, all of my final products have been different from what I set out to do originally.
And
they evolve. Yeah, and that's
the creative.
That's the well, yeah. It's a combination of exploration and judgment. Mm-hmm. It's a feedback between taking a chance and creating something, and then standing back and saying,
doesn't look right.
Let's do something else. So I kind of consider myself to always be a student of my own errors and try.
How long will a process take to get a final piece?
It varies. This Vonnegut thing has been gestating for 6 years, and I've been working on it for 3 months, and it's going to be another couple months before it gets finished. The South Carolina one, thought about it and did maquettes ahead of time, but executed in 2 months.
Wow.
And so it varies.
It varies, yeah. So the last question I'll ask you today, as you talked about your unfamiliar materials that you like to use, why do you like to go for the more unfamiliar, where you could be using materials that you are comfortable with? Why is that inspiring to you?
Well, within 10 years or less, I'm going to be dead, or my hands are going to be so arthritic I'm not going to be able to do any more sculpting. I can see that on the horizon, and I'm still a student. I'm still a beginner. I'm still trying to... I'm doing right now at nearly 71 years old what most people are getting done at 21, which is experimenting and trying different things, going to art school, messing around in different media, finding what they want to focus on.
Right.
And I wouldn't mind finding something that I could really focus on and be comfortable with and not vary too much, but it's still, I think, both necessary and enjoyable to be messing around,
to be in the unfamiliar.
Yeah. Kurt Vonnegut said, "We're here on Earth to fart around." Okay.
To fart around.
To fart around.
So
that's what we ought to do.
Yeah.
And I think that if I learn more now, then the few years that I have left will be more productive.
You have lots of years. You have.
Well, I still hope that I've got. You don't know what my hands feel like.
No, I don't.
So I've got to have a versatile portfolio of experiences that I can draw on, based on different purposes and venues that they could be shown in, and as well as what my physical capabilities are.
Beautiful. Well, nice to meet you, Keith.
Again, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your time.